welcome to the Sci-Fi and Fantasy edition of the incoming video podcast, a show that looks back at the week's sci-fi and fantasy miniature releases. This is episode 22, which looks back at the releases for week ending the 5th of March 2010. As always, I'm your host, Neil Shook. An interesting mix of figures released this week, so I hope you find something you like amongst my favourites of the week. At number 10 we have a new release from UK company Brigade Models, not to be confused with Brigade Games. Now, Brigade Models tend to specialise in small-scale sci-fi miniatures, and here we see their latest release of 1/3000 scale sci-fi spaceships. These are specifically for the Pacific Federation, or the PAC-Fed. And here we see a selection of ships starting at small escort frigates right up to heavy cruisers and carriers. Quite an interesting set of miniatures. As far as the inspiration is concerned, they seem to be some sort of cross between a Star Wars Y-Wing and something out of Battlestar Galactica. Oh, well, I'm not altogether convinced with the huge runways on the carrier. I think overall this is an interesting looking fleet. Number 9, a new box set release from Mantic for their Undead range of miniatures. These are the Undead Resonance. We saw a champion a few weeks ago, and this is the complete box set. Certainly an interesting set of figures. It's nice to see a group of undead figures that are actually in armour and clothes, as opposed to just these animated skeletons wandering around all the time. Something a little bit different. And certainly Mantic's plastic ranges seem on the whole to be going from strength to strength. Number 8, a couple of new releases from Redbox Games. Redbox are known for their 28mm fantasy figures. Here we have another couple. First of all, there is Gunhildroth, who is a female barbarian. A fairly typical female barbarian figure. Nothing we haven't seen before, really. Secondly, we have Ravina, who is a rogue. We've seen here with dual-wield weapons, including a short sword with a buckler. Interesting figure, this. Slightly different in the fact it's a little bit more swashbuckling in some ways. So you could actually potentially use this as a female pirate figure, for example. Two nice releases from Redbox. It's nice to see that they seem to be getting a nice slight anatomy for female figures. Nice looking stuff from Redbox Games. Number 7, and an interesting little release from Killer Bee Games. These just really appealed. First of all, we have the Kappa Royal Guard, who appear to be a fairly standard pulpy style sci-fi troops. Something you would probably expect to come across in something like Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, that sort of thing. And then you see Prince Unukas, who is leading the guard, and you see that the helmets they're wearing are actually because their head is shaped in exactly the same way. Really quirky figures. I suppose the whole comedy helmet thing just really appealed. Very strange stuff from Killer Bee, but really good all the same. Number 6, and something slightly different. What I wanted to do here was feature several new releases from a brand new company. It's a company called Minos, and they started up with a whole host of new releases. I've chosen my favourites from amongst what they've listed on the website. Here you see a full selection of various different fantasy and sci-fi figures. Of the figures you see, probably some of my favourite are actually the Orcs and Goblins. They seem to do a really good job with those. Also with the Troll. Some very nice figures looking here. The sci-fi stuff, maybe not quite so much, although there are definitely a couple of figures which you might want to consider putting in amongst your 40k army. Especially the last two. They seem very influenced by sci-fi gothic sort of themes. Interesting new company, I think. Well worth checking out. Number 5, and a new release from Euphoria Miniatures. Now, Euphoria have been around since about November. Haven't seen very much of them recently. Here is a new release very much in the alternate World War II buxom female officer wearing bondage gear sort of ilk. Although whether she's alternate World War II or whether she's actually sci-fi is, I suppose, almost a bit of a moot point, really. She happens to have a pit bull terrier with her as well. Again, typical sci-fi fare in a lot of ways. Interesting simply because of the addition of the dog, I think. The cliches that you see in this particular model. It's not a bad one. Number 4, and a company I see on the odd occasion, these are Kabuki Models. Really interesting release this time. Here we see a model of Anubis, Lord of Envy. Basically, here we have an Egyptian god brought to life. This obviously is very reminiscent of something you might see out of something like Stargate. That whole genre, I mean, especially in the original film, where you had some of the gods as Anubis up and walking around and stuff. That whole genre and imagery really appealed. It's one of the reasons why, although I haven't tried it, I'm really impressed with all the war god stuff. I just love the actual setting for that particular game, and this evokes all that. So here we have the Egyptian god Anubis as a sci-fi character. Awesome stuff, really like this figure. Number 3, and a new release from Freebooter. A little bit toss up of whether this belongs in the fantasy or the historical realm, as it's a pirate. However, given what he's currently armed with and the amount of stuff he's armed with, I think this fits firmly within the fantasy range. All that said, it's an excellent little sculpt, isn't it? Really impressed with the sort of output that Freebooter are doing at the moment. They've got some excellent character figures, brilliant detail. As you see from the close-ups here, really well done. Right down to the engraving on the handles of the pistols, and all the stitching around the cuffs and various other bits and pieces. An excellent pirate character figure from Freebooter. My number 2, and as I just said, I'm a big fan of the War Gods range. One of my favourite ranges at the moment are the Wendigos. 3 new releases from War Gods this week for this particular range. We have a couple of War Chiefs, one armed with some sort of frostblade, and the one armed with more standard kind of Stone Age weaponry. Finally, we have the Master of the Hunt and the Howlers, which are just awesome looking models. Seriously impressed with these, and under most circumstances, these would be my number 1 for the week. Excellent set of sculpts from War Gods. The more I see of these, the more I'm really tempted. I mean, it's just another game system, but I'm really quite impressed with them. However, my number 1 this week had to be a new release from Mythal Miniatures. They produce, on occasion, limited edition figures. This is their latest one. Now, they have an official license to produce Tolkien miniatures, and this is the Unexpected Party. Seen from The Hobbit. Here we see Bilbo in the middle of a room, surrounded by Gandalf and Thorin's dwarves. Quite simply, a fantastic model. Very much against the flow of what dwarves feature in a lot of fantasy. I think Games Workshop have an awful lot to answer for in the way dwarves are portrayed in miniature. These dwarves here are much more to the Tolkien side of things. If you look around the miniature, just all the little details of all the food, all the different poses for the particular characters. You've got some guys with instruments, you've got guys carrying around plates and what have you. Just a fantastic vignette. It's not cheap. As I say, it's a limited edition. There's only 100 of these being made, and it works out at, was it 180 euros? That's a lot of money, but I'm sure you'll agree. Fantastic looking model. Something completely different and almost unique. So if you're a huge Tolkien fan and you like something a little bit different, I think this is well worth a look. Even if your bank balance doesn't stretch that far. And that's it for another week. Interesting range of miniatures, I think, this week. Something for everybody. So I hope you've seen something that you found of interest. Before I go, just like to say thank you to Bill at the Miniatures page and Zach at Tabletop Gaming News. Without these guys' sites, this podcast simply wouldn't be possible. So, thank you ever so much for watching. Take care until next time, and I'll see you soon. Bye.